Recently, I was watching the trailer for Marvel Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings again. I'll confess that I've watched this trailer many, many times, and I've loved it more and more. But when I watched the trailer for the first time, I have to admit that I felt a little uncomfortable. It wasn't immediately evident to me, but after thinking about it a little, I realized that it somehow felt wrong to see an Asian face being the main Marvel superhero. I'd never seen an Asian in such a high profile role before, and it felt uncomfortable, but amazing at the same time. Finally, someone who looked like me. Despite the slight discomfort and feeling a little worried if people would receive the movie well, I felt so happy. I think part of my worry also stemmed back to the controversy that first came up in 2019, when Asian Boss released the video interviewing people in China about the choice to choose Simu Liu to play Shang-Chi. By Chinese beauty standards, they called him either ordinary or ugly, and if you look at the Asian stars and idols and models in Asia, you can see why. Simu Liu is handsome and muscular, but also down to earth and feels more like the typical Asian man you see on the street. While in Asia, there seemed to be a little bit more of a preference for a more slender and beautiful type of man. I love the fact that he responded with a lot of grace to that video, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him on the big screen. But I think that sense of discomfort and feeling of worry that perhaps Simu Liu might not have what it takes to attract an American audience is really an indicator of how I felt Asian actors have been treated in Hollywood. And my discomfort and yet delight that I finally see someone who looks like me taking on such a huge role in such an amazing franchise is really telling me the kind of media representation that I and probably many others see today. The fact is, while the population of the United States has grown increasingly diverse, what we've seen in the majority of media has not. According to US News on January 22nd, 2020, many of the most diverse cities in the United States are found in California, including Los Angeles, Sacramento, Fresno, and Stockton, along with other notable cities like Chicago, Illinois, Houston, Texas, and New York, New York. However, if we think about many of the films and TV shows set in California, Chicago, New York, and Houston, we rarely see such diversity, even in the background characters. In Dr. Nancy Yoon's book, Real Inequality, she writes that white people of color made up 37.4% of the US population in 2013. Actors of color were significantly underrepresented in film and television. Even in 2015, regular actors of color on broadcast primetime television lagged 9.2 percentage points behind the corresponding US population percentage. Now, 9% doesn't seem like a lot, but when you consider that the US population in 2015 was more than 300 million, and 1% of 300 million is 3 million, that means there are about 27 million people of color who are not proportionally represented on the screen. Now that is a staggering number and severe underrepresentation. Having a role model when you're young plays a huge part in a developing child. And with the prevalence of media now available to every child, what they see on screen and whether they feel like they can relate to them or not is really important. So I decided to recruit some of my friends and have a conversation with them about the media they saw growing up and how it affected them. While I won't be able to let you see the whole conversation, and I might not be able to give everyone an equal amount of time to speak, I just want to thank my friends for agreeing to spend almost 2 hours with me out of their evening just to talk about films and TV shows. Also, don't be worried if some of them start disappearing near the end of the video. Some of them had to leave early just because they had to get ready for some of their tests and finals. Now, before we get into the conversation, I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. I'm Patrick. I am born and raised in Southern California, and I am currently a third year computer science major at UC Irvine.
Hi, I'm Kelly. I am a senior at Biola University, and I am a communication sciences and disorders major. And I was born in Hong Kong and raised in Shanghai. And when I was 18, I moved to California.
My name is Jamel. I was born and raised in the Southeast in Georgia. I'm currently a working professional in the Orange County area.
I'm Esty. I was born in China, raised in California. I'm adopted, so yeah. I'm a junior at Biola University, and I'm studying elementary education, but right now I'm taking a gap semester.
Hello, I'm Kay. I'm a junior/senior psychology major at Biola, and I was born and raised in Hong Kong up until right before high school, and then I moved to California.
Hi, I'm Josh. I was born and raised in Southern California. I am currently finishing up my last semester, and I am studying accounting and information systems.
We started out talking about a lot of the shows that we saw when we were young.
I think I watched a lot of typical like Disney, Cartoon Network.
I watched a lot of Disney and PBS Kids.
Pokemon for sure. And then Power Rangers.
Nickelodeon, so like Powerpuff Girls.
SpongeBob was always playing, so that became a favorite.
I really liked Wonder Pets and Little Einstein.
Mr. Rogers, that was the show. Like it was my brother loved watching that show.
On weeknights, I would just sit down with my brother and we'd watch Power Rangers.
Codename Kids Next Door.
Tom and Jerry.
I watched like Australian shows like High Five and Wiggles.
Teen Titans.
Like the sitcoms.
That's So Raven.
Hannah Montana, Wizards of Waverly Place.
I mentioned a few shows I watched when I was very, very young. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Teletubbies, VeggieTales, Sesame Street, Reading Rainbow, and stuff like that. When I was little, my mom was very conscious of the media I watched and tried to find media that would help me to grow and establish my character. She was aware that a lot of the media I watched, I would imitate. I found that a lot of my friends had similar experiences with how shows affected their behavior when growing up.
Wizards was like my favorite because I thought they were so cool and stuff. And like the sibling relationship was like so tight because they'd roast each other all the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's me and my brother. And then I really liked Selena Gomez at the time. So I was, yeah, really into that for a bit. I think I really wanted to be Alex because I thought she was so cool. She's like cool and like sarcastic and like better at magic than her stuck-up brother who's like so like a stickler to the rules, but like she always knows like how to bend it in a way that's like really, I think, big brain and smart. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's so cool. I want to be like that.
I know one thing I really liked was actually a show called Zoom that was on PBS back in the day. And something that I personally really loved about it was the fact that there were these kids who were, you know, at that time they were my, well, I mean, they're still my age now, but back then, like it was just very relatable because there are people of different backgrounds, like there are people who were like Jewish, like Irish, Black, Asian, and especially during that time during the 90s, that was something that was like, it was a rare jewel. And even then they would just talk about just even issues that were happening during that time. They actually had a segment on like an episode dedicated to like 9/11 and like the kids actually processing what happened and them voicing like, you know, some of them felt scared, some of them felt confused, some of them felt really sad. So I think like providing like that type of platform for them just to be themselves versus it being a portrayal.
Like one movie I watched a lot was like Narnia, and then there was like The Resemblance. But also, I don't know if you guys know, but the series of like Kingdom Under the Sea. But it's basically like this, like a cartoon-ish thing about these fishes or fish. And like the story is based on these fish, but they all like there's a message behind each movie or segment, and then they're all like kind of Christian based. So I feel like, yeah, my parents did like.
Me and my brother, we'd always watch Power Rangers. We'd always like do the fighting moves and stuff with them, and then we'd like break stuff, and then we'd be told to sit down. So
I realized I didn't watch like Disney sitcoms until later because my parents didn't like how sarcastic they were because they didn't want me to be sarcastic. So they're like, you're not allowed to watch the sitcom. So I watched them later in life. But I just remembered Bible Man. I forgot about Bible Man. His armor I thought was so weird because it looked like a insect exoskeleton. But I think he was one of the people that I wanted to be like, which is a good thing too, because he knew like God's word and stuff, and I was just like, I want to know God's word.
I was also really interested and a little surprised to hear about some of their more negative experiences with the media they watched growing up.
Actually started watching 13 Reasons Why because everybody was watching it, but I like stopped because I started feeling like really like just down and depressed, and I think like just like the messages they were conveying, at least for me, they were like affecting my mood, so I had to like stop watching.
13 Reasons Why, I watched the whole thing actually, and it like I think there was good and bad. It was good because, at least for me, it made me think about the topic more and like be more aware of the situation and be more aware of what it like that it actually is a thing that's real that happens. But it did put me in a really bad place.
In relation to the shows that I mentioned, I don't think they particularly influenced me because I felt like I couldn't really relate to them. Just because like the characters and the like storyline and all of that were too unrealistic, or especially since I lived in Hong Kong, like my environment was very different from what was portrayed in like the American shows that I watched. So in like that regards, I don't think it influenced me, but like for the more Christian movies or shows, I think they kind of helped me to, I think they were like encouraging in a way to show how to live out my faith practically.
I thought it was interesting the show that Katie mentioned she did relate to the most, along with a few elements she didn't relate to.
I think I really resonated with Fresh Off the Boat because a lot of like the stuff that was talked about on there, or like I don't know, the how like the interactions in the family, or like the superstitions or whatnot, like I felt like I could really relate to that because I'm like not first generation immigrant, I guess 1.5. So I kind of like, yeah, a lot of the things that were said or that were portrayed on there, like I really resonated with. And yeah, it was funny to hear when they conversed in like Chinese as well. Like I felt like I could understand not just like the because when you translate, it's like different because it's I feel like some words they have like connotation for like the word in its original language. So I think it was pretty funny to like understand like the scope of like the whole show. I feel like I related in that sense, but because again, like because their situation was different from mine, like they were more Taiwanese and like I'm not from Taiwan, and like they were also in like Florida, so they were like portrayed as like the only Asians in the area, but like I live in a neighborhood with like mostly Hispanics and Vietnamese, so like it's kind of different. And yeah, I also have like extended family here, so I felt like as much as I could relate to some of the things that were portrayed, like I don't think I saw myself in the show just because our environments and our situations were pretty different.
What Kay mentioned about living in a neighborhood where there were a lot of Vietnamese and Hispanic families goes back to what we talked about earlier about racial diversity in prominent cities, however, not seeing the same thing on screen. This sparked a conversation just talking about racial diversity in films and whether or not things were getting better.
this was something I barely caught when I was little, but it's a show called Good Times, and I believe that's set in like Chicago. It's like these like low quality apartments where that are kind of reserved for people who are like below the poverty level and are just trying to make ends meet and stuff. And that show really tried to well, initially it was just trying to show like just the struggle of just like African American community and being in like that type of uh, being in that type of, I guess, like income level, and showing how like the dad had to like work in a manufacturing job to make ends meet, and the mom like kind of stayed home and stuff, and how they really wanted to instill like good good character or good yeah, good character in in the children. So like one of the kids, I forget his name, but like he was like really well read and really well astute, and um, that just kind of showed how they were trying to overcome this um, like this poverty that they were in during that time in the, I think, Chicago area.
One show that came to mind when you said that was so I watch a lot of Korean dramas, and so I don't know if you guys watch Itaewon Class, but it's on
Heard of
Netflix.
it.
Yeah, I think that show in particular pretty like stood out as like diverse, like with cast, because even though like the main two characters were like Korean, they also had one of the, I don't know the terms, but like they're still part of like the more main cast, but he's not like, he's a supporting character, and he was like Black or like African American, and so we don't see a lot of that. Like I watch a lot of Korean dramas and they're usually all pure like Korean cast, and so yeah, they had that. And then they also, in the storyline, they also had someone come out as like trans as well. So I feel like that show kind of broke barriers.
I think a lot of Marvel movies show diversity. I think because WandaVision, they have like Asian people with like agents, and then like Black Panther. Oh, Black Panther was such a good movie.
Wakanda forever.
Yeah, Wakanda forever.
Rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman. In case you didn't know, in the most recent 2021 Oscars, Chadwick Boseman was the first person of color to receive a posthumous nomination. The Oscars were started in 1929, yet there were a lot of notable firsts in the 2021 93rd Oscar. These are a few of the biggest ones. The 93rd Oscar was the first time two women had been nominated for Best Director, Chloe Zhao and Emerald Fennell. And Chloe Zhao was the first time a woman of color had been nominated for Best Director, and she won it. 70 women received a total of 76 nominations, a record for a given year. And Chloe Zhao is the first woman to receive 4 nominations in a single year. Emerald Fennell became the third woman with 3 nominations in a single year, joining Sofia Coppola and Fran Walsh, who both accomplished that feat in 2003. Emerald Fennell and Chloe Zhao also became the 6th and 7th women to be nominated in the directing category. And Emerald Fennell is the first woman to be nominated for a feature film directing debut. And Riz Ahmed became the first Muslim nominee for Best Actor, while Steven Yeun became the first Asian American actor to be nominated in the same category. Yes, progress is being made, but it took 93 years for so many firsts. And the firsts for people of color, if we look back in history, have been widely spread. This is why the hashtag #OscarsSoWhite was first introduced in 2015 by activist April Ring, and has kept resurfacing during the award season, especially in the year 2016 and the year 2020. However, one can claim that there are not enough women or women of color looking to be directors. The statistics show otherwise. In January 2020, the USC Annenberg Inclusion Initiative released statistics concerning directors of color and women directors. They compared statistics for the directors in the Sundance Film Festival in the US dramatic competition versus what was in the industry. I was really surprised by the gap between the industry and the US population versus how close the statistics were in the Sundance Film Festival. I appreciated the explanation of how the US dramatic directors were those who had 2 to 3 films under their belt, as Sundance has been a place known mostly for indie films, interesting styles, and more inclusion than most. But the dramatic competition is a little more representative of what the industry is like. and the kinds of movies that are likely to break out into the mainstream and get picked up by studios and networks. Thus, to see the statistical difference was shocking to me and proved to me that Hollywood is severely underrepresenting women as directors. If the numbers can be that close to the population at Sundance, that means there are likely enough women looking to be directors, but Hollywood just isn't hiring them and trying to play it safe with the directors they know, thus maintaining the cycle. I was also appreciative of the Metacritic score, detailing how it's not about the quality and reception of each gender's work that causes Hollywood to shy away from women directors. Since they have almost identical scores and female directors score just a little more than male directors, it just shows the bias present in Hollywood. The last thing we talked about to end the night was about how we could do diversity better and more authentic in Hollywood.
Like the first movie that came to mind was like the remake of Mulan, like the live remake. I don't know if this is like true, but I like, even though the cast and whatever, they're all like Chinese or like Asian and stuff, a lot of the people working behind the scenes, like I don't know, screenwriting, I don't know anything about film, but like all those other people, like they were not people of color. And so I think that also kind of ties back to the authenticity.
There should be more like inclusion in directing and the cast and the staff, because I think it does play a role, especially like, for example, like Mulan. Like you can't make a film about, you know, from a tale that comes from Chinese culture, yet have not that many, you know, people of color that can, you know, as accurately, you know, carry out this film. And so I think that there should be more.
At the end of the day, like I think for me, like it all goes back to like there's the whole politics of Hollywood, that even when you get that person in there, and I don't know, like maybe Jed, you probably know this better than all of us, but even people who are in those diverse directors, when they're messing around with Hollywood, like it's pretty much a business negotiation from there. So even when their intentions are good, like their initial idea is just going to get shot down, because at the end of the day, Hollywood is going to want to try and get as much of a money grab as possible, and sometimes that comes at the risk of, you know, just representation versus authenticity. And it's just like, all right, well, let's just throw this person in here. Oh, we need, you know, this too, right? Like,
you know, there's so many like groups, like not just like, you know, certain, like for example, like women or like men, but like, you know, there's so many different people that you need to represent. So I feel like it's going to be a learning process, like on how to integrate, like, you know, everyone in like a show or a movie. Even for like finding like your cast, right? Like you can't just find like random people to like fit the criteria of what you need. Like they have to like, you know, work well together and like, you know, even portray the characters well. So like I think that's a big thing too, not only in like the directing staff and all that, but like holistically speaking. But it is good to see that, you know, whether it's Marvel or like TV shows and things like that, like starting to like, yeah, make way into it.
I love the points that they made, and really I agree with them. I think there's a lot of politics in Hollywood, and I think there's a lot about the green, and often Hollywood likes to play it safe. But at the same time, I think there's a real need to step outside our comfort zones and start creating shows and films that represents the United States as it really is, a melting pot, a diverse nation, a pluribus unum, one out of many. I did intend to make a 25-minute video, but I think there's just so much to talk about and so much to listen to. I hope this has given you something to think about. And yeah, thanks so much for joining me on this journey.